doing the Emperor's work. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Lark's Lamentations, in a series where we take factions from various forms of media and cast them under a magnifying glass to see where they went wrong, and how they could have been improved. And since the last time we put the Stormcloaks on trial, it's only fair that we cover their loyalist counterparts, the Imperials. So grab your gladius, shine off your armor, because today we are headed back to Tamriel to find the flaws with the Empire and explain why, despite those flaws, they are still the best choice for humanity. Alright, now, just a little heads up, I'm not going to go into full detail and background onto the Elder Scrolls lore. If you want to, watch the previous Lamentations to get caught up. From this point on, I expect you to have either watched the previous video or have a decent knowledge of Elder Scrolls lore. Okay?
I've got it!
Okay. With that out of the way, let's get into the flaws of the Legion and the Empire they serve. Now, the Empire has a few problems to look over, the first and largest of which is everyone's least favorite treaty, the White Gold Concordant. Now, the treaty has a few stipulations: the disbanding of the Blades, the outlawing of the worship of Talos, and the Dominion annexation of Hammerfell. With all these treaty stipulations, it's clear the Empire was foolish to accept the treaty as it was written.
Thank you!
Don't get me wrong, I know Titus Mede II was put in a rough place after the Battle of the Red Ring. His armies were in ruins, and any further military campaign would have been impossible, but he still gave a bit too much to the Dominion, in my opinion. Keep in mind, the Dominion, while the victor of the Great War, was not much better off than the Empire. This is part of the reason why Hammerfell was able to rebel so effectively. The Dominion had not fully recovered from the war. That being said, the Dominion still came out ahead of the Empire, just not by as much as they would like you to believe. A fix for the treaty would have been simple, but perhaps difficult. Titus should have objected to two of the stipulations strenuously before he signed anything. First, the Talos ban, and second, the annexation of Hammerfell. Realistically, Titus would not have been able to get both of these, but he might have been able to get one. If he gave up Hammerfell but not Talos, Skyrim never would have revolted, and if he just banned Talos, Skyrim may have rebelled, but the revolt would have been crushed much quicker, as well as a faster recovery for the Empire as a whole. I suspect, given the choice, the Thalmor would prefer Hammerfell's annexation, as it provides a more promising prospect and injures the Empire directly. At least without the Talos ban, Imperial provinces that remain are more stable, with the added bonus that the province that they have annexed is already unstable to begin with. Hammerfell was already kind of going through a civil strife situation between the Crowns and the Forebears even before the war broke out. So let's just say the Thalmor once again bit off more than they could chew. But speaking of instability, let's talk about the Imperial's stability. Let's look at the leadership of the Empire itself and its legions. For the Empire itself, there are some problems. While I can't bring myself to fully hate Titus Mede II, I can't say the rest for the Imperial leadership. There is literally only one other political leader from Cyrodiil, and his whole purpose in life is to find a way to kill the Emperor. Man, you guys are really based off of Rome. Luckily for you, Skyrim lets you channel your inner Praetorian Guard and kill both. Beyond that, not much else can be determined outside of Skyrim. I mean, we do see some Imperial mages from the Synod College, who are oddly more about politics than magic, but they aren't really relevant as a whole.
Afraid you've wasted your time.
So let's look at something a bit more relevant in Skyrim and take a sneak peek at the Jarl's rule in Allied territory. And if I'm being honest here, only 2 out of 5 of the original Imperial Jarls I actually have any form of respect for. The Jarl of Markarth is okay, but he's partially responsible for the Markarth incident, and his city is almost as corrupt as Riften, just sub the Blackbriars and for the Silverbloods. The Jarl of Falkreath is just the worst. He's incredibly corrupt and lazy. Think of him like a Skyrim Commodus, always putting his own pleasure above the needs of the people.
Difficult? I'm a Jarl. I eat the most succulent meat, drink the finest ale, and hunt with the best hounds in the hold. Meanwhile, my very capable steward sees to the needs of the small folk, and ensures that my hold runs smoothly. Being a Jarl could hardly be simpler. You should try it sometime.
What an asshole!
And Jarl Elisif is just an indecisive, and she's clearly a puppet. On the other hand, there's Jarl Ravencrone, who is shown to have a level of wisdom, even if it does come with an unorthodox personality. She's also shown to be able to look past the prejudices most of her kin holds towards magic, and understand that it can be of value to her hold. Finally, there is Jarl Balgruuf, who is just the best Jarl in the game. I love this guy. He's grateful for your help, treats you like a friend, and even helps distract the Thalmor so you can sneak into their embassy.
Say no more.
Worthy hero
I
will
was
step
wondering
forward
what you
and
were
solve our
doing here.
problems. I'm glad to play my part.
Jarl Bolgraf is a bro, and is also the best way to fix the leadership in Skyrim. See, I understand being pissed that Elisif is a candidate for High Queen, as she is just a puppet and clearly has no experience ruling. Everyone knows she is just a figurehead. It's clear Falk Firebeard is the one running the day-to-day operations in Solitude. So, the simple fix for this is have the Imperial candidate for High King not be Elisif, but Bolgraf. He understands the needs for the Empire, he still respects Nord culture and Skyrim's people, has years of experience being a fair and competent ruler, and knows how to stick it to the Thalmor. Having him be the next High King would assure the Empire has a loyal High King, and Skyrim has a king who is loyal to his people and traditions. Sadly, the Empire is dead set on Elisif, though a shame. I would fight for Bolgraf in a heartbeat. And what's also funny is if you talk to a lot of Stormcloak fans, even though they typically join Stormcloak, their biggest regret about joining the Stormcloaks is that they have to go against Bolgraf. I guarantee you that you would probably see more people go Stormcloak if you could bring Bolgraf over to the Stormcloak side. But alas, Bolgraf knows which side is superior, so we're going to move on.
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. And fuck you, I'm out.
Alright, but enough about the Jarls, we need to look at the leaders elsewhere in Skyrim, because the Empire imported a few. We call them generals. Let's talk about General Tullius.
It is only fitting.
Now, Tullius has a lot going for him. He is clearly the best military mind in Skyrim and understands how to see the bigger picture. See, when the rebellion first breaks out, Ulfric seems to be doing okay. The Imperials are having some trouble, so the Empire sends in General Tullius. In a few months, he takes hold of the situation and captures Ulfric along with his personal bodyguard.
A masterstroke by General Tullius. He's only been in charge here for a few months, but he's turned things around for the Empire. We've been trying to catch Ulfric since the war started, but he always seemed to slip through our fingers, like he knew we were coming. This time, the general turned the tables on him. Ulfric rode right into our ambush with only a few bodyguards. He surrendered pretty meekly too. So much for his death or glory reputation.
There, the war's pretty much over. Ulfric is about to be executed. Oh, and then look, a giant dragon god just busts out of a time thanks to the Elder Scrolls, and by coincidence, the Stormcloaks are able to escape. Left to his own devices, it's clear which leader is superior at controlling armies. But Tullius doesn't just show himself to be a talented general, but also a skilled negotiator and diplomat. In the truce quest line, the Dragonborn can get both sides to agree to a truce, but Ulfric won't let that truce happen. He demands something from the Empire, and specifically, he wants Markarth. Tullius wants something in return, and he will take any settlement from Ulfric in exchange to make that truce happen.
Yes, let's get down to it. We want control of Markarth. That's our price for agreeing to a truce.
Now, many of you are probably scoffing, really? Tullius is just going to give up the largest source of silver in Ulfric for any town? Even Winterhold? Well, you poor ignorant child, it may surprise you to know that Tullius loses nothing by giving up Markarth. In fact, it's actually hurting Ulfric. Think about it. Giving up any of his territory gets rid of what little territory he has and puts legionnaires in his backyard.
I don't like Imperial troops holed up in Winterhold. Such a close march to Windhelm.
But Tullius has lost access to Skyrim's silver mines. Really? Has he? Markarth's silver mines are controlled by the Silverbloods, who are Stormcloak sympathizers. This is such a problem. Prior to the truce, Tullius sends spies to investigate them and try to get the deeds to the mines.
Standing here.
I was sent to investigate the Treasury House and the Silverblood family. They own Sidna Mine, one of the toughest jails in Skyrim. I was hoping I could buy or steal the deed, but I don't think that's how things work here.
Likely this means the Empire was not benefiting from the silver mines in the first place. So the Empire's silver production isn't impacted. Regardless, it's not that big of a loss. To add on to that, Markarth is an incredibly hostile territory. It's rough mountainous terrain, which is perfect for guerrilla warfare, which the local Breton Forsworn use to their advantage. So while Tullius is recovering his forces, Ulfric will be busy losing his soldiers during the truce to Forsworn bushwhacking. He will not get the rest and recovery that the Imperial forces will. So, once the truce is over, Ulfric is going to be worse off than where he was before, where Tullius will have had time to recoup and gain strength. On top of that, Tullius is one of the only military leaders at the Peace Summit that does not lose his composure. Ulfric, by contrast, throws 2 temper tantrums if he thinks things aren't going his way. Just in case you're wondering why I graded him lower on his diplomatic skill.
Not a bad starting point. You heard the man, Ulfric. We've made you a fair offer. Are you serious about these talks, or are you just here to posture?
As for you, General Tullius, I see now that Galmar was right. Talking to the Empire is just as useless as ever. If you think you can hold Markarth, you're as deluded as your Emperor when he signed away our freedom to Thalmor. Skyrim will never again bow to your false empire. Let's go, Galmar. I should have listened to you in the first place.
You always were a fool, Ulfric. You're no better at diplomacy than you are in the battlefield.
Another thing that Tullius has going for him is that when he has victory, he capitalizes on it. He doesn't leave his enemy alive with the possibility of rebelling again. He takes advantage, killing his enemy, making sure the rebellion is cut dead.
Song or not, I just want it done.
Where Ulfric leaves the biggest threat to his power alive and well, just waiting for the Empire to come busting out of High Rock to try and restore her to the throne. So, looking at Tullius, we've got a lot going for him. There is one problem, though. Tullius' only true fault is that he has a lack of understanding of cultures other than his own. Ironic, considering who he's fighting. But his lack of understanding for the Nordic culture can be a bit of a problem, as he is dismissive of it on several occasions, and this dismissal can lead to problems in, seizing the opportunity and predicting his enemy. However, he does have a counter to this, so we really don't need to fix it all that much, because Legate Ricca is there to sort of keep him up to date on what the Nordic culture really appreciate, how to not offend them too much, how to stay on their good side, and how to play to their advantage. Legate Ricca is an excellent counterbalance to this, and therefore, if I was going to add a fix to it, it would just be to remove Legate Ricca and make Tullius appreciate Nordic culture more. But honestly, having Legate Ricca there as an advisor to Tullius seems more realistic. Now, we've talked about the military brass. Let's look at the military as a whole. Honestly, it's pretty good. Like I said, we are basing this off of Rome, and if Rome has anything going for it, it's a strong military. And so, with all this said, there's a wide range of recruits they can pull from with varying backgrounds and skills, because just in the Empire alone, you have the Remains of Skyrim that are loyal, you have in Cyrodiil, you have the Imperials, you have, of course, High Rock, and several Orcs, and High Elves and Dark Elves that are willing to join up with the Empire. So, yeah, got a lot going for them. That means we have our high infantry covered, our light infantry covered, and though we don't see a lot of them in game, we know that there are battle mages, likely mostly coming from either Breton or Imperial stock. But still, nonetheless, they have them and will use them. We just don't see them all that often after Helgen. From documents, we also know that they have a large cavalry corps. I would actually like to see it, though. Bethesda, come on. Let's see some cavalry charges, man. Let's do it. With all that inside, there are parts I would like to see more, but this does, at least in paper, have everything a pre-modern fantasy army could want. But there is one thing we have to fault them on. You see, I got on the Stormcloaks for it, so I have to fault to the Legion for it too. Why do you wait to use artillery for the last battle? Artillery is your friend! Use it whenever possible. You see there are multiple fortifications all throughout Skyrim that could be taken down by a few catapult strikes. Come on, I can just feel Napoleon's ghost glaring at you. The only other problem I can find with the Legion is the ridiculousness of joining the Legion. Now, I can't knock them on this too hard, because this is exclusive just for the Dragonborn, not for the regular recruit. But it's still silly that Legate Ricca demands you take a fort filled with bandits by yourself, which is ironically harder than clearing most Stormcloak bases.
You survived Helgen? General Tullius told me what happened. Not many made it out alive. I've got a good feeling about you, and I don't often get good feelings about anything. A warrior knows to trust her gut. I'm not going to go through the normal process with you. I've got a little test lined up. Pass that, and we'll talk about you joining the Legion. The kind that evaluates your usefulness during duress. I'm sending you to clear out Fort Hrogstad. If you survive, you'll pass. If you die, then I'll have no further use for your corpse. Fort Hrogstad is one of the few that remains mostly intact. We're going to install a garrison there, but first, you're going to clean out the bandits that have moved in. Yes, this is a test. I don't think you're regular militia material. I want to see what you're capable of. Good, that's what I want to hear. Now go make it happen, soldier.
Thankfully, this isn't standard practice, but it's still bull. At least Galmar has the decency to use a test that was steeped in tradition, and he only used it on soldiers he wasn't sure about. I guess Rika thought that since you were from Helgen, you might be untrustworthy, so she wanted to test that. But the problem is the test she gave would not determine whether you were trustworthy, it was just whether you were strong. It's honestly uncharacteristically stupid for her. So to sum up, the Empire has some questionable politicians and excellent generals, minus one weird exception for you, Rekka. I don't know why you did that. And other than that, a terrific military structure. And with all that being said, I have to say, the Empire does have its flaws, but it's relatively realistic, looks very similar to that of a late Roman Empire, maybe an early Byzantine Empire, if you will, a little unstable on the political situation, but as a military that's starting to rebuild itself and starting to regain its identity. But with all that being said, I can hear so many of my fellow intellectuals asking some tough questions. Or maybe a couple of tough questions. Like, yeah, the legions aren't maybe not be bad, but really are they the superior choice? How are they going to beat the Thalmor with the treaty still in place? And why does Serana not love me back? I'm glad you asked, for I can answer 2 of those questions. That last one, I'm sorry. We're all still trying to answer that one. Maybe time will heal this wound. Because restoration magic certainly isn't cutting it. Anyway, moving on to answering the first 2 questions. So why is the Legion the superior choice? It's actually quite simple. They're stronger, more reliable, and overall more unifying. The Empire is able to successfully take people from all races and unite them under a common banner. This is not an easy undertaking. The Stormcloaks, by comparison, have trouble getting the majority of the Nords to join them. The Legion makes the best of its resources, and not only has solid infantry and missile units, they aren't afraid to use magic like the Stormcloaks. This gives them an edge in pretty much any engagement or simulation you can think of. And speaking of which, let's take that Dragonborn out of the equation. If we take the Dragonborn out, the Legion was going to beat the Stormcloaks 9 times out of 10, because 1, we already saw it happen at the beginning of the game. The reason the rebellion honestly wasn't crushed immediately is because the Legion only has a handful of soldiers in Skyrim. The vast majority of the legions are stationed on the border with the Dominion. Sending more legions to Skyrim would jeopardize the border with the Dominion, which is exactly what they're hoping to get to happen. Now, with that information in mind, consider that Ulfric and his rebellion could barely hold their own against the skeleton crew of a force in Skyrim, and Galmar believes they can bring the fight to the Dominion one day. Yeah, press X to doubt for that. If you want to screw over the Dominion, you're going to have to pick the Legion every time. But, my good sir, you are neglecting the White Gold Concordant. Relax, my good man. I have not forgotten that pile of mammoth excrement, but I am happy you brought it up. You see, the thing is with the White Gold Concordant, it really doesn't matter in the long term.
Explain yourself.
Settle down there, Chief, settle down. See, the Empire agreed to the treaty not because they wanted to, it's because they didn't have an alternative.
When the choice is to sign or to starve, there is no choice.
Both the Dominion and the Empire know war is coming later, and when war breaks out, you can guess that the first law to be repealed is the cursed Talos ban. You can also imagine that any Dominion agents caught within Imperial borders after the war breaks out will enjoy the same treatment they gave the Blades before the First Great War. So don't worry, you will get your revenge for all the kidnappings they do in Skyrim. I would also like to remind you that those kidnappings in Skyrim would not have happened if Ulfric had not started the Markarth incident, which gave the Dominion an excuse to send treaty enforcers into Skyrim.
I think I did okay.
Carrying on with that, I know the Stormcloaks are having trouble with coming to terms with the fact that the Empire is playing the long game here. They think the treaty is unjust. They don't just think it, actually. They know the treaty is unjust, and they want to rebel against it because they want to get rid of the harsh, unfair treatments. I completely understand, but rebelling to get rid of it in the short term does more harm than good. It's better to bide one's time patiently and put your effort into rebuilding your forces so you can go in for the big win. It's better to do that and wait for the opportune moment to strike than to act rashly and play right into the Thalmor's hand.
It involves listening and waiting for the right moment to strike.
Now, some of you might say, though, whoa, hold there, Chief. Didn't the legions lose to the Dominion in the first war? Won't they just lose again? There you might have a point there. This is a possibility, but not as likely as you might think. Keep in mind, the First Great War was a major upset to the Empire because they were caught off guard after the ultimatum. See, the Emperor was given the ultimatum to submit to Thalmor demands, and when he rejected it, they sent in an invasion a couple days later. The ultimatum they sent out was designed to be rejected. They just wanted a pretext so they could go in and invade. So, literally, rejected treaty, days later, invasion breaks out. That is less of a time between the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and the start of World War I. So, the Empire did not have a lot of time to prepare and get ready, which is why the Thalmor made such amazing gains in the early days of the war. It was practically a blitzkrieg. And despite this advantage in this blitzkrieg, the Dominion could still not achieve complete victory. Their forces were too badly bloodied. Sure, they captured the Imperial City, but they lost it again. And this is so much so that even though they finally were able to enforce a heavy treaty, they were not able to hold any new gains they made in Hammerfell. The only really luxury they could take from it is that they were able to send treaty enforcers into Skyrim to start political chaos. See, in the next war, the Thalmor will not have the luxury of surprise. Their best hope for success is to have the Empire constantly drain its resources into the political chaos that is Skyrim, so the legions will be weak enough to break through. Like I said in the end of my last video, an independent Skyrim just benefits the Thalmor. Sure, it isn't the constant drain on the Imperial resources that they had previously, but this is a huge blow to the Empire and opens the door to have High Rock break off too, as the Empire is shown to be weak again, leaving only Cyrodiil, and you know how that depression goes. Even if you ignore all that, there's an even better part about picking the Legion that is going to scare the Thalmor shitless. I want you to think about something. When the Emperor dies, and he will die, who do you think is going to replace him? That's right. You. Just like you set yourself up to be High King in Skyrim if you ally with the Stormcloaks, you also set yourself up to become Emperor if you pick the Legions. Now, I know you're like, whoa, how does that work? I want you to think about it for a second. Titus Mead II is most likely dead by the end of the game in Skyrim. We all do the Dark Brotherhood run-through, let's be honest, the alternative just isn't as fun, so the only other option really is just ignoring it, and we're not going to ignore all that fun experience, gold, and loot. It's just not going to happen. So, with that said, he's going to die, even if we don't do the Dark Brotherhood run-through. There's enough people that want him dead that he is going to die. And so, with that, there is shown in-game that there is really not a clear line of succession. Maybe he has a son, maybe he has some illegitimate successors, but the problem is the politicians and the Imperial Council probably don't have the stomach for another Mead Emperor. So they're probably going to want to look for somebody else. And so who do you think they're going to choose? One of the limp-wristed counselors? Probably not. They can be taken out relatively easily as shown in game. Tullius? He's probably the best orthodox choice, at least at first. However, there's a problem with this. Though he is no doubt suited to the role, he's a skilled military commander and he does know his politics, he has a distaste for things outside of military matters. Though he handles himself well in the truce, it's clear that he doesn't want to be there. He'd prefer to take the fight to Ulfric traditionally, rather than handle things out through peace negotiations. So anytime he's forced to do anything that is outside of military matters, he's going to groan and start drinking heavily.
I hate giving speeches.
It wasn't so bad.
The Dragonborn, by contrast, will make the most sense. Because it's simple. The best dynasties have been started by Dragonborns. First you have Saint Alicia, then you have Raymond Cyrodiil, and of course Talos himself. By joining the Legion, your Dragonborn becomes the hero of the Empire.
The Empire glories in your accomplishments.
The vanquisher of the vampire threat, the slayer of the first Dragonborn, Miraak, and you have stopped the literal apocalypse by killing Alduin. They would have to be certifiably insane not to offer you the job. I imagine the streets of the Imperial City will be full with people clamoring, chanting your name, begging to make you an emperor. And if you're still not convinced, remember, you'll likely have the support of the legions because you were a loyal soldier that fought with them in the trenches. And of course, you likely have the Thieves Guild and Dark Brotherhood backing you, which means you can play a little dirty to get yourself in that position as well. So, what limp-wristed council member is going to try and cross you? When that would be political suicide, if not actual suicide, because like I said, you could probably kill them or get somebody to kill them or destroy their political reputation. And if all the stars align, which they will, the sweetest part of this is look at the Dragonborn Emperor from the Thalmor's perspective. They hear a new emperor has been crowned. This new emperor is responsible for ending the civil war in Skyrim. Not only that, he's ended not one, not two, but 3 apocalyptic crises. And this new emperor also has a connection to the Blades, and is known to have a grudge against the Thalmor, so much so that he has openly attacked their agents. The even worse part of this for the Thalmor is the new emperor is a Dragonborn. Yeah. Guess who was the last Dragonborn to come from the north and also become emperor? That's right, Tiber Septim, aka Talos.
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man. Now what the fuck are we supposed to do? We're some real pretty shit now, man!
Remember, the reason the Thalmor are so salty about Talos worship is because Tiber Septim was the first and only person to conquer the High Elf homeland. And this new Dragonborn has a lot in common with old Tiber Septim. Both came from the north, both became high-ranking military officers in Skyrim in harsh military campaigns, both were summoned by the Greybeards, and both probably killed their immediate predecessor. Yep, checks everything. Isn't it a bit of poetic justice that those knife-eared assholes banned Talos worship, only for Talos to practically be reborn and retake control of his empire?
Hello, boys! I'm back!
And it gets even better, friends. Remember, Talos didn't conquer Tamriel as a fully fledged Dragonborn. He couldn't shout. He lost that ability when he became emperor because of a so-called assassin attack the night before, the night when the previous emperor died. Well, in all likelihood, Tiber Septim himself did the deed, and he cut a slit across his neck solely so that he couldn't be accused of being the one. But regardless of that, the wound across his neck made it so that he could not rely on his shouts. He had to use strategy to conquer the rest of Tamriel. So, that's the thing, though. You don't have that wound. You can still use your Thuum. So when war breaks out with the Dominion, the elves not only have to fight without the element of surprise, not only do they have to fight without the element of surprise, they have to fight a unified empire with a massive military that is completely pissed at the Dominion and is chomping at the bit to get back at them. And they are led by a fully realized Dragonborn with a couple of living, breathing dragons at his beck and call. At this point, the Thalmor better make peace with the Divines, because they are about to meet them. Now, wait just a minute there. If the Dragonborn is so powerful and that dangerous, why couldn't the Dragonborn do the same thing as a High King of an independent Skyrim? Alright, that's a fair question. The answer's simple. Skyrim on its own doesn't have the same resources to go on the offensive campaigns that a united empire has. The Thalmor are far away from Skyrim's borders. The Dragonborn, once he assumes the mantle of High King, he might be able to take High Rock and parts of Morrowind or Cyrodiil, but that's about it. See, he is a powerhouse in himself, and so are his dragons, but the thing is, he's going to have to constantly be on the move in order to secure these gains. He's going to have to rely on the Stormcloak army to scare garrison and station those areas, and as we've established, the Stormcloak army on its own is not an effective fighting force, particularly against those that are willing to use underhanded tactics and magic. So, that's not going to go so well. Once the Dragonborn dies, all of his gains will likely be destroyed if he was able to secure any gains at all. Simply put, Skyrim on its own does not have the population or resources to take on the Dominion in an offensive strategy. Like I said in the previous Lamentations, the Dominion can't touch Skyrim while the Dragonborn is alive, but once he or she dies, then Skyrim can actually be threatened. But if the Dragonborn is allied with the Legion, Emperor or not, then humanity can actually bring the fight to the god-cursed elves. So Simply put, one choice let Skyrim have a few days of glory, being the pinnacle of human civilization, purely because it's the only one left. And then it brings in the onset of a new, elven-ruled Dark Age. But the other choice allows you to breathe life back into a dying empire, to save mankind in the process. So which will you choose, Dragonborn? Where will you be when the Great War comes? Will you play the part of Tetricus? Will you secure Skyrim's future, but only for a few decades? Or will you be Tamriel's Aurelian and save everything worth saving? For me, I know my choice. Restitutor orbis. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.
And that wraps up this two-part Larks Lamentation on Elder Scrolls Skyrim. If you haven't seen the Stormcloak video yet, please go watch it. It really is a good video, and that'll help you understand more of what he's talking about in this video. But my brother did a whole lot of hard work on this. He really put a lot of time, sweat, and tears into it, and now he needs a little bit of a break so that he can play for gaming's sake and, you know, just take a bit of a break from all this research, but still, I really appreciate him doing all that. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts on Elder Scrolls Skyrim, on the Empire, and on the Stormcloaks. Just please be respectful. That's all we ask of you. And please leave a like in the video if you haven't already and you really enjoyed. And we will see you in the next video, whenever and whatever it is. Take care.